Not a matter of if, but when crisis will rock your world. I'm Roshini Rajkumar, crisis strategist, licensed attorney, and host of The Crisis Files. In each case file, we explore a real-world crisis. My crisis squad and I look for solutions. I also turn to people who are working angles from the inside to improve the landscape for everyone. My guest is Deb Broberg. She is Executive Director of RealTime Talent. Her organization provides data insights and employer talent consulting to slow or reverse talent shortages. The talent crisis across high-growth and high-demand industries and occupations is real. Deb is here for the case file I call Workplace Intelligence. Deb, I understand that RealTime Talent uses something called Talent Pipeline Management, TPM. What is that?
Talent pipeline management is really nothing more than thinking as any business person would, Roshini, about how you're going to plan for your most important asset, your people. So it is a supply chain methodology where you simply intentionally work through end-to-end thought processes around forecasting your vacancies, your additions if you're planning for growth in your organization, and it just gives some very practical guidance to what HR folks often do in bigger companies for the work they do daily.
So we're seeing all over the country that there are talent shortages, or now with the other layer of people not wanting to work in the office, you've got some of those issues.
Right.
They want to work from home. But you also see every state in the nation has development offices. They're working with employers. They're trying to match talent and employers. What are some of the common issues that you're finding with the states and the organizations you're helping?
You know, common issues are interestingly familiar from state to state. But the issues are that it's hard for employers to slow down and planfully look out for any given period of time. And as industries, it's really difficult to get competitive employers working together to forecast and help folks that are providing supply of educated and ready-to-work people be ready with the right people. So it's that misalignment of what's being educated and taught and trained to with what the employer jobs and currently jobs of the future being such a big focus. They're not matching up.
What are some of the data insights that you're giving to employers? And I'm guessing a lot of listeners of the Crisis Files out there are leaders. They might even be the ones in hiring decision mode. What should they know that maybe they don't know now when it comes to some of these data analytics?
Really important factor is to think differently about how you plan for your people needs in your organization. Gone are the days when you are competing for people with your competitors. You are absolutely competing for people more than you ever have, but in order to have enough qualified folks in the pool of talent out in the marketplace, employers can no longer do that work together inside their own shop. They have to work outside and work with their competitive employer sets to really more intentionally forecast what those jobs are going to need.
So you're saying they can't only look at their own company, their own brand. Employers in general have to maybe pool the data and the intelligence.
It's rethinking their hiring strategies and their selection processes. It's about understanding that what you do in your company with your culture and how people behave in all levels of the organization is what truly differentiates you in the marketplace. That is critically important because people have choice like they've not had for a long, long time. But you do not differentiate yourself by trying to be internally focused on identifying minimum hiring requirements, identifying a selection process that you think will get you the best workers in your company. That is no longer the competitive differentiator. In fact, that almost drives some workers away. If you overthink that hiring process, but rather work with your competitors and get really crisp on what you truly need to have for a human being to do the work. And I would say minimum qualifications are fraught with problems, not only process problems, but internal and external biases that come to the workforce and the employer side of that selection process. So really getting crisp on aligning all of that across a given number of employers so they can speak with a unified voice to those that are in our workforce development spaces, our career force offices here in Minnesota, but all the career development spaces across our country. Lots of resources available, but guess what? Every time they ask employers what they need for job X or job Y, they hear something a little different, when in fact it's the same work.
RealTime Talent is based in Minnesota, but it helps states all around the United States. Let's talk about some specific examples to make this more concrete for people. Let's start with Kentucky. which has a statewide TPM, talent pipeline management strategy, with a designated talent pipeline practitioner for each industry. What does that mean in real people's terms?
So here's what's interesting. Kentucky's been at this for about 7 years now, because it takes a while to get clear around your local geographies and what your regional economies are looking like in any given location. But what Kentucky had done is take a leap into this talent pipeline methodology, really looking at specific industry sectors. And they had practitioners in each regional economy across their state. But that individual then starts working with equine industry or the healthcare industry or the manufacturing industry, and it starts to bifurcate the end results that could be compounded and make more of an impact. So after a couple of years of that, they identified that actually working statewide, they were ready to do that. So they have industry practitioners that become experts in those areas and those sectors in their economy, and they really start to have the relationships then with community organizations or agencies like departments of corrections, for example, is another huge opportunity for all of us across the country, and we often have just not helped employers think that through.
What your example with Kentucky reminds me after the events of 9/11, 2001, where we found that emergency services were not connected in talking with each other. So are you kind of saying here in Kentucky, on some of these types of jobs or in certain industries, these pipeline practitioners for each industry, they're speaking across the whole state.
They are.
So talent, like if you need a job in one part of Kentucky and you might not have even looked, but if you're able to be in touch with that talent practitioner, they know where to place you or they know how to help the
connections.
company.
Here's an example that's just so exciting. I have two for Kentucky. The equine industry is one where, we all know of Kentucky for horse breeding and racetracks and so forth. But they critically realized they were not finding enough people coming out of their agriculture sector who were interested in taking care of their horses and grooming and breeding and maintaining that industry. So they quickly realized they could rethink their hiring requirements, rethink their practices as an industry, rethink where they might find people, and they started working with the Department of Corrections very directly and intentionally. And they've now got relationships with those that are in rehab, so working with a lot of other organizations helping with chemical dependency and rehab issues, and finding a whole new set of human beings that are actually thriving and loving the work and doing really, really well.
So lots of win-wins. I also love the example in Phoenix where the talent pipeline management has a specialty nursing initiative. Tell us about that.
Specialty nursing. Well, Jennifer Meller with the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce, leading their foundation's work in this talent and workforce development space, got several of their hospitals together, 9 of the hospitals in the Phoenix area, which includes Mayo, because they have a location there as well. But they all pooled their efforts and energies and realized specialty nursing was going to be in crisis. Part of this work means the employers start bringing forward their own confidential metrics. And that all gets aggregated and kept in confidence, but it gives the participating employers a frame of reference. So with those 9 hospitals, they realized they were going to have a 25% growth need in their facilities within the next 8 to 10 years. And so the numbers clearly were not there.
Which means they need more employees.
Need more employees, absolutely. And the other metric that was very compelling for them was to aggregate and define consistently, how much is it costing us to hire a specialty nurse? And guess what? They found over $10,000 initial investment. That's actually pretty low. But as they started to really peel that onion as employers in their safe space to talk confidentially with one another, they realized the upskilling education they had to do, the lost productivity on the floor where these specialty nurses are acquiring the skills they need to do those specialty roles. It was a significant expense for these employers, upwards of $170,000 for some of those bigger hospitals to bring that one person up to the level of care that they needed to have them working at.
Wow. So really pooling brain power.
Exactly.
Pooling analytics and data. I love it. All right. And let's not forget Vermont. Give us the example of how Vermont is using talent pipeline management to operate in several industries.
Marianne Sheehan is one of my colleagues out in Vermont who is very adept in this practice and this framework. And she was fortunate enough to get all of her hospitals and care providers, clinics included, to come together and really recognize the significant gap that they were experiencing in this particular job of nursing. They didn't go so far as to isolate specialty nurses, but nurses as a whole were going to be seeing a significant exit and not any talent in the pipeline to anywhere near meet that exit. So they've identified an apprenticeship program, which is often associated with manufacturing or other industries, right? Healthcare has historically not worked with apprenticeships through the full government registered apprenticeship model. But there's clearly a place. These employers have come together and identified again some of their actual expense data and been able to identify a funding partner. And these employers are doing these apprenticeships with nurses who are working through their educational ladders that they have to pass in order to do full registered nursing work, and actually developing an employer-funded set of monies that they circulate back into paying their people on payroll who maybe are doing an LPN job to then work on the floor and get the experience they need in their clinicals while they're funding some of the expense that goes into the education components as well. It's really cool stuff.
Well, and I love hearing about the apprenticeship program because I would say nationwide, lots of places are having conversations about, does every high school graduate need a 4-year degree or, even a 2-year degree? Maybe there's something else out there, but we still want everyone to get a job and be able to make a living one day, right? It is wonderful to hear there are some of these successes. Just for everyone in general, let's talk about some of the jobs of the future. How has some of the data and analytics that you're seeing at RealTime Talent, what are some overall trends you can share?
Well, one of them is clearly gaining lots of momentum across every state in our nation, and that is the shift from what you were just speaking about, credential-based hiring, into a skill-based hiring model. And so employers have historically been able to use that credential as a very good way to deselect people in your applicant pool, right? And that's always the mindset in making sure you need to be able to clearly and honestly answer someone who doesn't get the job offer as to why. So credentials back in the day, like back in the 80s, if we can think back, there were many, many applicants for every open job. So it was important to weed through the pile. And back then, it was a literal pile of paper, too, let's remember. But those hiring practices have been instilled now for decades and often haven't been addressed or changed at all, when indeed the work doesn't require a specific credential. So that is the shift we're seeing where employers, and particularly when they come together to do talent pipeline planning work, really realize if they're honest with themselves, they don't need that 4-year degree. They maybe need some other specific skills. And educators are now trying to figure out how to align around that, too, for lifelong learning. That's the other big trend. Jobs are not going to be staying as static as they may be used to. Careers are not going to be as long-lived as we know they might have used to have been. And therefore, all of us have to be learning every single day, all along the way, because the jobs are shifting so quickly.
Wow, well, lots that you have given to us to think about. Thank you, Deb, for your challenge to employers everywhere and all the great information for all of us as we think about the evolving future of work. Learn more at realtimetalent.org. Today's Crisis Brief is brought to you by Navigate Forward. Number 1, realize the workforce and the nature of work are changing. Number 2, talent is the employer's most important asset. Number 3, data matters and should not be ignored. When used wisely, results mean bigger benefits and more qualified talent pools. Losing your job can feel like a crisis, but it's actually a great opportunity to reimagine the work that inspires you. If you're an executive who's ready for what's next, let Navigate Forward be your guide. Their career transition experts work exclusively with CEOs, VPs, and senior leaders around the United States, virtually or in person. Find out more at navigateforward.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to The Crisis Files on your platform of choice. Check out our website, thecrisisfiles.com, to catch up on all case files in one easy spot. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at The Crisis Files. I'm Roshini Rajkumar. Join me next time on The Crisis Files.